morning. My name is Margaret Salazar, and on behalf of HUD's Office of Multifamily Housing Programs, I am very pleased to welcome you to the Partners in Housing Multifamily Preservation Training. This training is designed for owners and senior management company staff that work with HUD-assisted and insured multifamily properties. Preserving our existing portfolio of multifamily affordable housing is one of the overall strategies of HUD, is one of our top priorities. These properties provide critical housing resources to our communities and to very low-income seniors and families across the country. Partners in Housing is part of our overall preservation strategy. The webcast that we'll be broadcasting today and tomorrow caps off a series of in-person trainings that HUD has held with owners of multifamily properties around the country. The goal of this training is to provide you with tools and information so that you can make informed decisions about strategies to preserve your multifamily property and maintain it as quality, affordable housing over the long term. The trainings today and tomorrow will run roughly from 12 o'clock noon to 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. You are welcome to log in for the full workshops both days, or to pick and choose from the topics that are most relevant to you and your portfolio. Thank you very much for making time to watch the webcast today and tomorrow, and also for your ongoing commitment to providing affordable housing. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to our skilled presenters, Gates Dunaway and Margie Masonette. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. I'm Gates Kellett Dunaway, and I am with Tapestry Development Group. We are a 501c3 nonprofit development and consulting firm in Decatur, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. Our mission is to develop and to preserve affordable rental housing, and we do that through a few lines of business, one of which is to work with owners of HUD financed, FHA financed, and Section 8 properties and help them develop strategies to renovate and preserve their properties. Margie?
Hi, I'm Margie Masonette, a managing partner of Federal Practice Group, a small business here in DC. We serve mostly our federal clients in all areas of multifamily housing, finance, subsidy administration, compliance, training. And prior to joining Federal Practice Group in 2007, I worked at HUD for 15 years in the Office of Multifamily Housing and the Departmental Enforcement Center.
Thanks, Margie. We're going to go through the agenda with you. For those of you who registered for this course, you should have already received this agenda, but we're going to go through this at the beginning of each lesson that we're going to do today. As Margaret said, this webinar is broken up into, today it's 4 lessons and tomorrow it's 3 lessons, 1 hour each, with 15-minute breaks in between. And you're welcome to join into all of them or to join into the ones that relate to you and your property. So the agenda for today is we will start on lesson 1, which is a broad 10,000-foot view overview of HUD and the programs that HUD has, and how in each of the programs we're going to talk about in this first lesson, we will talk in more detail about later. There'll be a 15-minute break starting around 1, and then we'll pick back up at 1:15 for lesson 2. And lesson 2 and 3 are for folks who have properties that were originally financed with 236 loans. So the first of those 2 lessons, lesson 2, discusses the need for prepayment permission and things that revolve around that. We'll take a quick break, and then Margie will start in on lesson 3, which is about decoupling and the advantages you have through a 236 decoupling transaction. In that lesson, we will also be talking about flex subloans and mark-to-market and a few other what we call little ancillary programs that are important. After a break, we'll start in at 3:45 with the last lesson of today, which will be a lesson on the preservation of Section 202 supportive housing projects. So this would be for the owners of the 202 properties out there. We'll pick back up tomorrow. On Friday, we'll probably start in more closer to noon, and lesson 5 is a lesson Margie does on preserving your property through Section 8 renewal options. After a quick break, we'll start in at 1:15 on lesson 6, and then lesson 7 follows. And these 2 lessons originally were taught together, and we've split them up. The first lesson, lesson 7, is about refinancing your property through FHA loan products, the 223F and the 221D4 program. After a quick break, our last lesson of the webinar, lesson 7, should start at 2:30 tomorrow. And it will be reviewing at a very cursory review of the low-income housing tax credit program and how it could help you with your preservation. Also for those of you who Pre-registered, you should have received a knowledge assessment, which we hope you were able to complete before this. The knowledge assessment is a tool that is used by HUD to determine your knowledge before the webinar, and then it'll be out there again for you to do after the webinar to see what you learned. Also, let you know that this webinar will be archived on the HUD website very soon in the future for you to review again or to recommend to staff and other folks in your industry. So let's start in on Lesson 1. Lesson 1, HUD's mission for providing affordable housing. We have 6 objectives we're going to try to cover in this lesson. The first is to identify statements that accurately express HUD's mission for providing affordable housing and sustaining the investments of the department that has been made over time. The second is to estimate the total number of families that are provided with affordable housing through rental properties. The third is to recognize HUD programs and initiatives that support providing affordable multifamily housing. The next is to explain the importance of keeping affordable rental housing available to the people who need it. Then to identify the challenges and the potential benefits to keeping your multifamily property available to low-income or elderly citizens. And the last is to recognize potential solutions to challenges you are facing preserving affordable multifamily housing properties. There is a lot packed into this lesson, and we will go through many slides. This is probably the most slide-driven of the lessons, and we appreciate your patience with that. So let's go on to topic 1.1, HUD's mission. I'm going to read straight from the mission. HUD's mission, this is an excerpt, is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. In more detail, HUD's mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all, and HUD is working to strengthen the housing market, to bolster the economy, to protect consumers, to meet the need for quality, affordable rental homes, to utilize housing as a platform for improving quality of life, to build inclusive and sustainable communities free from discrimination, and to transform the way that HUD does business. This is HUD's mission statement as it relates to this webinar. A key goal for today and tomorrow is stated here. Among HUD's core strategic goals is the goal to meet the need for quality, affordable rental homes. The focus of this training is aligned with the specific key HUD goal, and it is to preserve the affordability and improve the quality of federally assisted and private unassisted affordable rental homes. Topic 1.2 is HUD's affordable rental housing programs. We will now run through a very brief description of each of the programs that are going to be touched on in more detail here. So this is your table of contents really for the next 2 days. HUD's sustained commitment to affordable rental housing. For over 50 years, HUD has made a significant investment in affordable rental properties through a variety of programs. It's critical to preserve these properties and to sustain these investments, as we all know. So the first program we're going to talk about is the Section 8 program, which most of our audience should be familiar with. It was authorized by Congress in '74. Its purpose was to provide rental subsidies for eligible tenant families, and HUD originally provided Section 8 project-based assistance to owners for terms of 20 or 40 years after the construction and rehab of existing rental housing. Most of these contracts have now renewed under the Multifamily Affordable Housing and Rental Affordability Act, called MARA. Owners may now renew Section 8 contracts for 1, 5, or 20-year terms when they expire. No new Section 8 is being provided, but existing contracts provide a subsidy that bridges the gap between rents needed to sustain properties and the rents tenants can afford to pay. HUD's ability to enter into new Section 8 project-based contracts was repealed in 1983, but HUD continues to renew more than 1 million Section 8 contract units annually. The next program we're going to talk about briefly, and we'll touch on this in Lesson 4 today, is Section 202. The Section 202 Elderly and Disabled Housing Direct Loan Program originally provided below market interest rates on up to 50-year mortgages to developers of rental housing for low and moderate income elderly and persons with disabilities. In later years, the direct loan program provided mortgages at market interest levels on 40-year mortgages to developers of rental housing for low-income elderly and persons with disabilities. The Section 202 program recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, and the earliest 202s were funded with low-interest direct loans starting as far back as 1959. Many Section 202s are also assisted Some or all the units are assisted by Section 8 rental assistance contract. Today, HUD is no longer making Section 202 direct loans, but oversees approximately 2,660 active direct loans. These loans are beginning to reach maturity. More than 80 loans will mature in the next 5 years, and many are looking to obtain financing for seniors to age in place or to make other improvements to their properties. After 1991, the Department discontinued providing Section 202 direct loans, and instead, HUD makes available the Capital Advance and Project Rental Assistance Contract, PRAC, assistance available for the development of new Section 202 and Section 811 projects through a competitive allocation process. The next program we're going to talk about is Section 236. The Section 236 mortgage and interest reduction payment, which we call IRP, program provided monthly subsidies to effectively reduce interest rates on private 40-year mortgages for seniors or for families. The basic rental charge determined for each unit deemed sufficient to meet operating expenses plus debt service expenses at the 1% interest rate. Tenants are required to pay the basic rental charge or 30% of their income, whichever is actually higher. There's been no new commitment or activity has occurred since the program was terminated in '73, but HUD continues to oversee a portfolio of 1,150 active Section 236 loans, all of which should be maturing in the next 10 years. Many of these properties are owned by the nonprofit organizations. The next program is the Rental Assistance Payments, RAP, and Rent Supplement Programs, Rent Sup. These rental assistance programs were designed to aid very low-income families in Section 236 projects. Some were also in place for Section 202 projects. HUD provided additional subsidies that are equal to the difference between the basic rent and 30% of that income of the family to certain units in the project. Many insured projects receiving Rent Sup or RAP assistance also have Section 8 contracts in place. Approximately 25,000 housing units are still assisted through the Rent Sup or RAP contracts. All Rent Sup and RAP contracts will expire in the next 1 to 10 years. Unlike Section 8 contracts, HUD does not have authority to renew these contracts when they expire. I'm going to briefly touch on this. Section 221D3, below market interest rate, which we affectionately call the Beamer program. These are insured and subsidized mortgage loans that facilitate the new construction or the substantial rehabilitation of multifamily rental or cooperative housing for low and moderate income families. The reduced mortgage interest rate, which is usually between 1% and 3%, resulted in lower operating costs for these projects and therefore reduced rents. This program no longer provides subsidies for new mortgage loans. Some Beamers are also assisted with Section 8, but most are unassisted. Today, there are just 30 Beamer mortgages that remain active, and all of these will mature in the next 3 years. Then we have the Section 221D3 and D4 program. These mortgage insurance programs, they insured private mortgages to developers of rental housing. Some of these mortgages have prepayment restrictions. Some of these properties have affordability restrictions, or they are assisted with Section 8 contracts that make them an option for low-income residents. Next up is the Flexible Subsidy Program. The Flexible Subsidy Program, which we call the Flex Sub Program, was a secondary supplemental loan program that HUD made available to owners of HUD-insured or direct loan properties. These flexible subsidy loans have two components. The first is the Operating Assistance Program. These were designed to provide temporary funding to replenish project reserves, to cover operating costs, and to pay for limited physical improvements. Operating Assistance Program loans were provided in the form of a non-amortizing loan, meaning there was a balloon note that's due at loan maturity. The second type is the Capital Improvement Loan Program. These assisted projects with funding major capital improvements when they could not be made with project reserves. These programs were given via an amortizing loan, generally with an interest rate of about 6%. Flexible subsidy loans typically must be paid in full when the owner prepays the HUD first mortgage. However, HUD may consider requests to defer payments, and we'll talk a lot more about that in a later lesson. Next up are Section 221D3 LIPRA and ALIPA programs. These projects were originally developed with the Section 221D3 loans. Owners received incentives for extending low-income affordability restrictions for the useful life of those projects. We have a small piece of that, I think, in Lesson 3. Today, there are more than 640 of these projects remain active, and they have unique challenges. HUD's working towards developing viable options to assist the owners of LIPRA and ALIPA properties. Finally, we have the Mark-to-Market program. One of the goals of the Mark-to-Market program was to reduce the project-based Section 8 subsidized rents that happened to be greater than the market rents, and to bring them back in line with the market rents of the area. It authorized HUD to reduce the Section 8 rents to the market levels for these projects. Some of these properties were able to continue to operate with the reduced rents, but some also required restructuring of the financing to achieve a smaller mortgage since the rents had been lowered. Next up, this is a link, it's a long URL, but this is the link to the HUD preservation website, multifamily website right here. And I don't believe we have an interactive on this, but basically if you go to the HUD website and you go to housing and multifamily and then preservation, you will see just about every topic we're talking about today and tomorrow. There'll be a section heading there. And many of the notices that we're going to talk about, much of the information we talk about is located on this website. So the last little piece before I hand it over to Margie is this question of how many households are provided with affordable housing due to HUD project-based assistance programs? And the answer to that is 1.2 million. 1.2 million households, not just folks, are assisted through this program.
Great. Thank you, Gates. Right, moving on to topic 1.3, the importance of affordable multifamily housing. Margaret touched on this earlier, the department's commitment to preserving affordable housing, I think really hits home for me, having worked here for 15 years, and this is the first time that I can think of where HUD has made this commitment to the industry to go out and do these free training sessions, the basic lesson, this webinar, and that is going to follow up with an advanced one. I think that just speaks to the importance of having affordable housing for folks. So moving on. So why is affordable multifamily housing important? Well, we really do know, those of us that work in this arena, why it's important, but here's some good reminders. It meets the housing needs of a range of different types of households. I think today I read a recent article that talks about what we used to think of the nuclear family of the mom and the dad and a couple kids. Now that's about 25% of American households meet that typical definition. So affordable housing serves the needs of a lot of different people. Families, seniors, handicapped, et cetera. And so multifamily housing is also a key component of smart growth, where you can have multifamily housing developments. There's less need for infrastructure changes. And it's important to the economic vitality of a larger community, particularly you have a ready-made workforce there that you have greater density than with single-family housing. And then, of course, we like to see increased demand for building materials to help bolster the economy. So what's at stake with affordable housing? We know there are different potential impacts when you have insufficient affordable multifamily housing. Members of low income, special needs, and elderly populations may become homeless if affordable housing is not available. Economic challenges, fewer jobs, and high foreclosure rates have increased the demand for affordable housing. Of course, we've all seen that more recently with the recession that started in late 2007 and 2008. And then the 2010 census data indicates that nearly 1 of every 2 Americans have fallen into poverty or are classified as low income. Another thing that we're also seeing in a lot of the housing markets today is that rents, conventional rents, are increasing at a greater pace than we've seen more recently. So why preservation is a key affordable housing strategy. Gates talked about HUD's mission. We know that HUD has different important strategies, and of course the main topic here is affordable housing. Growing needs, worst case needs grew by nearly 1.2 million households, or more than 20% from 2007 to 2009, and by a whopping 42% since 2001. And worst case needs is generally described as people who are paying more than 50% of their income for rent or living in substandard living conditions. Loss of stock over the last 10 years. For every 3 new affordable housing units built in the U.S., we've lost 2 affordable units. It's also a key housing strategy to do affordable housing because it's more cost effective. Rehabbing an existing affordable apartment can cost 1/3 less than building a new apartment. In more expensive communities with high land costs, the cost of building new affordable housing could be as much as double the cost of preserving the existing affordable housing. So thinking about current challenges and benefits, it's so easy to always dwell on the challenges. So one of the things that we really strive to do in doing this training is talk about the great benefits of it as well. So we'll cover some of those here. HUD has identified several key challenges. One, aging properties. Properties were built up to 40 years ago, and of course, if you come from Chicago like I do, if you've been to New York, you see some properties that are much older than 40 years. And a lot of these need accessibility upgrades. They have structural issues. They could use green and energy efficiency improvements. You know, also thinking about aging, it's not just the properties that are aging, but also residents, some of the owners, and we'll talk about owners who decide to get out of the program a little bit later in this session. We know we have obsolete housing out there, older properties that were built with small studios or efficiency units that are hard to market. Properties have vacancies that are hard to fill. We'll talk about unit conversions later as well. We have increasing cost of management and compliance. HUD requirements can be onerous. I'm sure some of you might think that, and expenses have grown over time. Financing, the economy can make it hard to find financing to make project improvements, sometimes to support the existing and future needs, despite recent low rates for refinancing. And then complexity issues. Doing preservation transactions, including refis and acquisitions, is complex and can require training. So now let's talk about some of the key benefits associated with preservation. Stable project income. Projects that are preserved as affordable housing are able to lock in long-term rental subsidies that provide a stable source of rental income and a waiting list of potential tenants. Obviously, this is a nice form of credit enhancement that lenders like to see. Better cash flow. Projects that refinance with today's low interest rates can reduce debt service costs and improve cash flow. Owner equity and cash distributions. Owners can often tap into the increased equity of a project when the project is refied, helping bring income to the organization. Owners may also receive increased year-end distributions from a project. And one of the things we'll talk about in here during this session as well is about ability to improve distributions and even achieve net sales proceeds for folks who previously weren't able to get them. Another benefit, low default rate. When the owners preserve their properties with a lower interest rate loan, there's a less risk of defaulting on the loan. And then new incentives and flexibilities. HUD has new programs, many of which we'll talk about today and tomorrow, to provide increased flexibilities to owners working to preserve housing as affordable. Okay, moving on to topic 1.6, preservation challenges and potential solutions. The potential solutions presented in this topic are not mutually exclusive, so of course there are different options that folks could consider that will vary by your situation. And they're meant to serve as examples to demonstrate that there are several options available to preserve affordable multifamily housing. So let's go to our first challenge, which is that many 202, 236, and D3 mortgages are maturing and affordability restrictions are expiring. One potential solution that HUD has identified is you might want to prepay the existing mortgage and refinance using FHA multifamily mortgage insurance, a conventional loan, and/or low-income housing tax credit, or perhaps some other source of financing. And this is particularly important because, as Gates mentioned previously, a lot of these older programs, you don't have that identical program available today. There is no equivalent today of a Section 236 that mortgage that takes your interest rate down to 1%. Another potential solution is participate in the markup to budget program and make repairs if needed. So another challenge, expiring Section 8 contracts. What do you do? One potential solution is request a rent increase using the HUD markup to market program or the markup to budget program for capital repairs. We'll talk a lot more about both of those options tomorrow. And then execute a 20-year Section 8 rental assistance contract which helps attract lenders and investors to the properties. And again, that is a major focus of the training this week. Another challenge, expiring rents up and wrap contracts. Few potential solutions, extend the expiring contract at current rents for up to 12 months. So this is consider an extension of the existing contract and not a renewal because HUD does not have the authority to renew these contracts. participate in the rental assistance demonstration program and convert the tenant vouchers to project-based vouchers for a 15-year contract. We'll talk a lot more about this as well. And then a third one that HUD has identified, tenants and units covered by these contracts may receive housing vouchers when the contracts expire. Later today, we'll talk about regular vouchers and enhanced vouchers. Moving on, loss of properties due to the need for repairs is another challenge. The first potential solution, refinance or secure low-income housing tax credit equity to make project repairs. If housing is truly uninhabitable, another option is to transfer the Section 8 assistance to another property, because sometimes not every property can be saved. And I've also seen over the last few years increased flexibility for transferring Section 8 contracts as well. All right, so here's another challenge I touched upon a couple minutes ago. Obsolete housing is not marketable and the property is not able to make ends meet. So you might consider converting the units from efficiencies or studios to one-bedroom units to reduce vacancies, make them more marketable. Our next challenge is unassisted project residents need additional subsidy. Right, one potential solution is unassisted residents may receive tenant protection vouchers when the mortgage is prepaid. It's very important to notice that the mortgage has to be prepaid. If the mortgage just simply matures, then they're not going to be eligible for the vouchers. Section 202 projects may receive senior preservation rental assistance contracts to provide subsidy to unassisted residents. So there's another potential solution. New challenge, property owner needs funds for other purposes and wants to sell the property to raise funds. It's the first solution identified by HUD, new flexibility for nonprofit owners of 236, D3 Beamers, or other insured projects to sell properties to purchasers who will commit to maintain the project as affordable housing, and the seller will retain all the proceeds from the sale. And we know in some cases where this is already happening. And then potential solution number 2, owners may be able to get equity out of a project in the form of a developer fee when they refinance. All right, here's the last challenge we have for this session. The owner lacks the capacity, ability, or interest to maintain ownership of the property. You know, maybe they've been in it from the very beginning for 40 years and they want to retire, and Junior doesn't want to take over, so maybe they're going to be interested in getting out of the property business. One potential solution, owners have incentives to sell the properties to nonprofits or other purchasers who will maintain affordability, because of course that's the goal. And with that, we're already up to our review questions for this module, so I'm going to turn it back over to Gates.
Thank you, Margie. So the pre-knowledge assessment tool had, I think, 10 questions on it. At the end of each of our lessons, we have 5 to 7 questions, some of which you would have seen before on your pre-test. And so what we're going to do is go over these questions and help you get to the answers, and then hopefully coach you for the final assessment. So the first question we have is, what was HUD's core strategic goal that relates to affordable rental housing? Admittedly, this is a tiny bit of a trick question because we touch on all 4 of these items in the first few slides. Option A, to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality affordable homes for all. Option B is to preserve the affordability and improve the quality of federally assisted and private unassisted affordable rental homes. Option C is to strengthen the housing market, bolster the economy, protect consumers, and meet the need for quality affordable rental homes. And the last is to utilize housing as a platform for improving the quality of life. For this purpose, the correct answer is B, to preserve the affordability and improve the quality of federally assisted and private unassisted affordable rental homes, as noted on an earlier slide. The second review question related to the first section is this. Today, HUD is no longer making this type of loan directly, but it does oversee approximately 2,660 active direct loans in this program. These loans are beginning to reach maturity, and more than 80 loans will mature in the next 5 years. Which HUD program does this describe? Is it the Section 221D3 Beamer program, the Flexible Subsidy Loan Program, the Section 202, or the Section 236? The correct answer is C, It's the Section 202 program in which there are no more direct loans being made, and there's over 2,000 active loans still in the portfolio. The third review question is, why is affordable multifamily housing important? Is it A, it is important to the economic vitality of the larger community? B, it is a key component of smart growth strategies? C, it increases the demand for construction materials and other durable goods, which in turn help bolster the economy? Or D, it meets the housing needs of a range of different types of households? Or E, all above? Which one is it, Margie?
Well, that would be cheating since I have the answer right here in front of me. Of course, it's E, all of the above. So it's one of the conveniences of being one of the facilitators. You get the good book with the answers in
That's
it.
right.
So if I get one wrong, I'm really in trouble. All right, let's move on to review question 4, which is, what statement accurately summarizes the net change in the number of affordable housing units during the past 10 years in the United States? So is it A, for every 2 new affordable housing units built, we've lost 3? Is it B, for every 3 new affordable housing units built, we've lost 2? Maybe it's C, for every 3 new affordable housing units built, we've lost 1? Or D, for every new affordable housing unit built, we've gained another? Wouldn't that be nice if it were D? All right, so the answer, of course, is B. We covered that a little earlier this morning. For every 3 new affordable housing units built, we have lost 2. Our last review question, question 5, which of the following are key benefits associated with preserving affordable multifamily housing? And of course, if you saw this on the pretest, you're asked to circle all that apply. A, improved cash flow due to low interest rates. B, decreasing costs of management and compliance. C, increases in owner equity and cash distributions. And D, stable project income. So let's see what the right answer is. All right, so A, improved cash flow due to low interest rates. C, increases in owner equity and cash distributions. And D, stable project income. We've talked about the increasing costs of management and compliance previously, so that's why that is an incorrect answer. All right, so here we are at the end of lesson 1, and Gates went through the objectives at the beginning, and what we like to do is recap those at the end to make sure that we hit upon everything we said we were going to talk about. So for lesson 1, we said we'd identify statements that accurately express HUD's mission for providing affordable housing. We'd estimate the total number of families that are provided with affordable housing through your rental properties. That's, we had 1.2 million in here. That one of the benefits of what we got to do in the live session was to go around the room and everybody would add up the number of units that they directly affected, either through ownership and management. And the numbers it was pretty impressive when you think about, the number of people's lives who you're affecting. Also, to recognize HUD programs and initiatives that support providing affordable multifamily housing. And we had another 3. All right, and my clicker just stopped working. Well, we'll get it fixed for the next one, but I'll go ahead and cover those. The 4th objective that we had today was to explain the importance of keeping affordable rental housing available to people who need it. Oh, there we go. I got it working again. I think I just had it off. Bad angle. All right. Identify challenges and potential benefits. Yes, this is live, folks, you can tell. Identify challenges and potential benefits to keeping your multifamily property available to low-income or elderly citizens. And finally, to recognize potential solutions to challenges you are facing preserving affordable multifamily housing properties.
So thanks, Margie. I think with that, we finished a little early, lesson 1, so we will ask you to tune back in at 1:15 Eastern Time. Is that right? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Are we done?
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Let me check this battery, because sometimes